Welcome to the first of maybe many of these live DLF Dynasty podcast shows. We're doing a combine preview, guys, and we're excited to talk with everybody out there who decided to take a little time to listen and hopefully be a part of the show here. It's our, like I said, first live show. And we're hoping to do more of these. We could cover free agency. We could do stuff that's draft related. Maybe it'll even expand beyond that. But we're going to be taking questions from Twitter and YouTube, and we got some things we want to talk about for sure. But before we do any of that stuff, guys, we got to bring in Ryan McDowell and Matt Price. Of course, I'm Dan Myler. We are the crew from the DLF Dynasty Podcast, and we will be with you for the next half hour or so, chat with, I guess as long as it takes. But first, Matt, how you doing, bud?
Doing fantastic, Dan. So excited to talk rookies. It's all I want to do right now. We only get an hour together each week to do it, so it's awesome to have this extra half hour to talk about these new rookies, this combine coming up next week. And, I mean, for you guys, it's extra exciting. You're going to be there next week.
Oh, yeah, it's only a few days away, Ryan.
I'm ready. I'm a little jealous. I see some people getting to Indy early. We're gonna skip most of the defensive players, the offensive linemen. We'll be there late in the week for those guys we really care about from a dynasty standpoint. But man, I wish I was there right now. I'm ready.
Yeah, me too. I wish I could ask those defensive backs, who's the best receiver you covered? Those kind of questions. I can't wait to see those on our timeline. Speaking of timelines, get your questions in. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, post a question below, and we'll try to get to as many as we can as we move along. But we thought we'd start off the show. Actually, Ryan, I saw you today talking a little bit about the combine, putting some feelers out there, and I saw one of your questions. I thought we'd start with it. It said, as a dynasty player, what part of the combine do you value the most? I think this is an interesting one. I'm sure you got a lot of interesting responses.
I did a lot of great responses, and really the responses were kind of all over the board. So that just shows you how important the combine is for different dynasty players, viewing it different ways. Some of them focusing on the 40. That always kind of seems to be the king of the combine, the thing that we look at the most. But other people talked about the agility drills, the speed score, especially for those running backs. That was mentioned multiple times. Really just the size of these players, because we know, we see players listed at 6 feet and 200 pounds, and it's kind of with a wink and a nod. We know that's not the real deal. So we'll find out this week, how tall these guys really are. Looking at you, Bryce Young, of course. But we're going to get a lot of questions answered. I think for me, my answer to that question has changed over the past couple of years. I've been fortunate enough to get to go to the combine, and being in that room and listening to those players answer questions, sometimes difficult questions, has really changed the way I value specific players. So I know that's, we said this on the podcast this week. That's not something that many people get to do. We're lucky in that way. But Dan, you and I are going to try to pass on that information, all those gut feelings that we get about players. We're going to try to pass that on to our listeners.
Yeah, maybe that'll be my answer a week from now. But in the past, I've been that couch quarterback or whatever, that guy that just watches the combine from a distance. And you gotta pick up as much of that knowledge as you can from the people covering. And usually it's the big names in the industry covering the NFL that you get as much of that as you can from. That's the thing that I probably take away, or that I value the most, is just the leaks, the little bit of information that comes out here and there. It's not necessarily what happens on the field. It's what kind of happens off the field that you hear just a little bit about. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. The interviews are kind of the most interesting point to really hear where these guys' heads are at. If I was to pick a specific drill, if that's the way you want to answer the question, I really like the 3-cone for running backs, and I like the vertical for wide receivers. And then the medicals, I think, are extra important. We have a lot of guys coming in with dings and nicks on them, and previous injuries that were catastrophic, and now they're presumably healthy. But getting all that stuff checked out of the combine and letting us know where they sit medically, I think, is also really important to hear for these guys.
So let's get to a couple of these questions, fellas. We got them rolling in. We gotta hit as many as we can. This one from Jimmy Cage. He asks, how do you guys feel about this wide receiver class? It's a stacked one, right? Other than Jackson Smith and Jigba and Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison. I got 2 early second round picks. Who do we like in that range? I know it's early, Ryan, but ADP suggests there's going to be some wide receivers in that range that we might fall in love with.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it's early. When I look at this ADP that we've got, I mean, we're seeing guys like Josh Downs. We're seeing even Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt falling sometimes to that early second round range. Unfortunately, if you're drafting post NFL draft, as most of us are, I think at least a couple of those guys. Flowers is going to go up into the first round. I think Jalen Hyatt will be a first rounder. I think both of those guys have a chance to be first round picks in the NFL draft as well. Downs might be your best chance in that early second round if you're looking for a wide receiver.
I'd really love it if Hyatt was falling into the second round, those early second round picks. That I feel like he is a first round NFL talent and a guy that could make a big splash early in his career. We talked about him on the podcast just the other day, Matt. Is there a guy that really sticks out for you?
Yeah, we talked about him just yesterday when we recorded. I just want to see what's going on with Kayshon Boutte. I just think the film is so good from that first year and a half, and post-injury, it was so bad. So I want to know what's going on with him from both from a medical and an interview kind of standpoint. But he's right there now in the 13th, 14th pick. I believe, in a one quarterback format. So he's someone that I would definitely like to take a shot on there, assuming everything checks out. Another guy we talked about, Rashee Rice, your guy there, Dan. I'm sure.
Don't steal my thunder, Matt.
I won't. I'm going to leave him for you. And then you guys already mentioned Zay Flowers, Josh Downs. They might get pushed into the first, but right now it's looking like, before the draft spot and landing spot and all that kind of stuff, that they are in that range as well.
Yeah, I was looking at our overall rankings over at DLF, dynastyleaguefootball.com. We do rookie ranking, single quarterback, and superflex. In superflex ranking, Rashee Rice is pushed all the way down there to 20 overall. He's as high as 14 and as low as 23. So he's looking like one of them second-round receivers, and depending on his draft capital that he gets and the landing spot, what quarterback he lands with, guys, I think there's the chance he could make a jump, end up in the higher part of the second round. I don't know if he has the upside to get all the way into the first round. It would probably take some major draft capital, probably early day 2, plus a really nice landing spot for him to jump all the way up there. But he's a guy I'll be watching closely here in the combine. Any other names, even deeper down the list there, Matt, that you're thinking about with these wide receivers that here in the next few days, when they show up in Indy and go and test, that could make a big jump?
I mean, we again, another guy we just talked about, Tank Dell. I mean,
Yeah.
Where is he? He's just so fun. He's so sound as a wide receiver. It's just that question of size, and that's going to be a problem for a lot of the wide receivers in this class. You have Quentin Johnston is a big guy, Cedric Tillman's a big guy, A.T. Perry's a big guy, but most of these higher these guys are going to be drafted higher are what we would consider undersized or traditionally been pigeonholed as slot receivers. So he's someone that I really want to see the measurements on. We have at the Senior Bowl, I believe it was 5'8", 5'805. We have him listed at 5'10". So we really need to drill down on him and really kind of get some clarity on how we feel about this player, because there hasn't been, if he does test at that 5'8" level, we don't have players this size that have been successful from a dynasty standpoint. So we are very excited about him. He's going as wide receiver 10 in the last rookie mocks, I believe. And that feels high for someone his size, but given what he can do on the field, that production first in the entire college football and receiving yards and touchdowns with 17, despite that diminutive size, he's going to be somebody who's really interesting to see from a testing standpoint.
The last guy I would throw out here, a name we have not mentioned on the podcast or on this show yet, Marvin Mims, a player that's really growing on me, started his career really well at Oklahoma. I don't want to say fizzled, but seemed to kind of hit a wall. I think he's got a lot more upside maybe than we're giving him credit for right now. Showing up in that late second, early third round range of our data, I think he could potentially jump a full round towards the early part of the second round by the time we're drafting.
Another question. We got a lot of responses here, guys. I know Toronto Dave, he says Josh Downs, baby. We glazed over Josh Downs' name, but his is going to be an interesting one for sure this week and on draft weekend for sure. We got another question here, though. It's from Recovering Ridley Truther. Buddy, I'm with you. Oh, my goodness. Are we at the point where draft capital is less meaningful than ever for running backs outside of Bijan this year? And, you know, for me, guys, it really feels like this has been the trend for half a dozen years now that draft capital doesn't mean quite as much unless you fall outside of day 2. There's not all that many round 4 and 5 running backs. There's only a handful of Aaron Joneses out there that become dynasty playmakers and guys that we can depend on a regular basis. Sure, there's the guys that fill in for a week or two here and there. But when you talk about draft capital with running back specifically, I think about day 2 as the prime spot to find your running backs for dynasty. Is there something beyond that for you, Ryan?
No, not really. And I wouldn't say that draft capital is less meaningful. I think we're just grading on a scale now, right?
Right.
We really, and we're going to get it this year with Bijan, we assume, but we really don't even expect running backs to be first rounders at this point. Just like we don't expect them to get those huge contracts. And maybe Saquon Barkley's the exception to that rule in free agency this year. But I think the NFL has just told us they don't value the position as much as they used to. So, you know, it's like second round is the new first round. If you're a second round draft pick, that's still very meaningful for a running back. But I do agree with you, Dan. Once you get to that day 3, I mean, we've been bitten by those day 3 running backs, really even just the past 2 or 3 years with Keyshawn Vaughn, with Trey Sermon. I believe all of those guys, both of those guys were those early day 3 picks with nice landing spots. You know, we got to learn our lesson on that.
For sure, we do, and I have. It's been painful. You know, we've all taken those types of players and regretted it within a couple of months for sure. Let's move on to the next question, and this one, I guess, ties into that just a little bit. It's from sorry if I butcher this, Master Uguay. All right, Master, we got your question here. That's probably a reference that I don't get. Who deserves to be the RB3 in this class, Matt? Sleeper is saying Charbonnet, but who knows? I'm guessing you're saying Charbonnet. He's your guy, right?
Yeah, I love Charbonnet, a big back that can catch passes. That's just, I mean, it's just injected right into my veins. I think he's the running back 3. I don't know if there's as big a gap between. I mean, I know Ryan said differently, I believe, the other day, but I feel like the gap between Gibbs and Charbonnet is smaller than the gap from Bijan to the rest of the class. So I'm not saying I would ever put Charbonnet 2 ahead of Gibbs. You know, maybe that changes with landing spot, or for some reason Charbonnet goes higher and gets more significantly more draft capital than Gibbs. I don't think we expect that to happen. If that were to happen, I might have him higher than that. But right now I have Charbonnet locked in at number 3. And I don't really see, it could happen before we get to the draft. But right now I don't see him overtaking that for me.
I really like Charbonnet as well, but I am wondering what it is the past 2 months, 3 months that has not only moved him up to RB3, but really created this gap between he and all those other guys that we talked about on the podcast and that we'll be watching this week. Devon Achane and Tucker and Bigsby. And I mean, those guys all have some concerns for sure, but I do think Charbonnet's the RB3 right now, but I'm not ready to lock it in by any means.
Yeah, I'm a Charbonnet guy as well, but I'm with you, Ryan. I'm not willing, at least until we get out of this combine, to feel real confident with that. We're there's a lot of information that we need to gather, and some of that will be throughout the combine process. Some of that won't be until draft day, really. We got to get confirmation on all these things. I am excited about his upside. To me, he's closer to that other group of running backs that some of them we haven't even talked about just yet, the Sean Tuckers and Tank Bigsby's. Even Zach Evans is in that group as well. Probably a tier above some of the other names that we'll get to later as well. But I think the field's wide open. I think there's room for one of these guys to really make a big jump. So when it comes to, after you get to it feels like those top two guys are locked in. It's Bijan, it's Jahmyr Gibbs, and then it's wide open. I mentioned some of the names in that next tier, guys. Is there somebody you're really excited about this week, particularly at the combine? Maybe it's Charbonnet. Maybe it's somebody else, Matt, that could really do a lot to their value to help themselves out on draft day.
Yeah, other than Charbonnet, I think it's A-Chain for me. Is he 195? Can he get to 190? He's just so explosive as a receiver. So again, we talk about size with these guys. How much does it really matter anymore? At the running back position, I feel like it matters a little bit more because these guys are going to take a pounding unless they're just going to be a kind of a space player, right? Someone like Tajay Spears, who I think, can fit into that range. Roschon Johnson, very interesting, right? Like he spent the whole career, basically behind the 101 with a bullet. So how can he separate himself? It's just the reason why I think Charbonnet separates himself a little bit, at least speaking for me only, is that he's got the combination of the size and the pass catching. I think you could make an argument that Sean Tucker has the same thing, but we talked about how he has kind of unreliable hands. And I just don't think he's the same kind of receiver that Charbonnet is at that size. All of the really nice pass catchers in this class outside of Charbonnet and Gibbs and, Robinson, I think most of them are kind of undersized. So that's something that we're really going to have to separate out with the combine testing and with draft capital, of course.
Yeah, I mean, going down a little further and looking at our rankings, even my own personal rankings, I'm getting that feeling that we're holding on to our priors a little too much. I mean, all three of us play in Devy leagues, and you look at the top of these running back rankings or ADP, and it's all players that have been Devy relevant for a couple of years now. Evans, A-Chain, Tucker, Bigsby. And then you get into that next tier, and those are the guys that I think could crash the party. And the two I'm really looking at the most are Roschon Johnson, that Matt already mentioned, and Izzy Abanikanda. I think those two guys could leapfrog multiple backs that have that name value right now. So those are the two running backs, other than Bijan, of course, that I'm most excited to see this week.
We're getting a lot of feedback from those out there that are watching. Shane Hallam says Devin A-Chain for life. That's a good one. He's an A-Chain fan. Gator says Charbonnet has glue for hands. Nice. He does have great hands. He's a good one for sure. And we got some Sean Tucker fans on here as well. Gator J mentions his name among a couple others. So we got to move on here. A guy we definitely need to talk about. It's Anthony Richardson. Dustin Stevens comes in with this question: if Richardson goes in the top 10, would you be willing to bet on his elite athletic traits and draft him high in rookie drafts? Or does his inexperience and passing scare you? I think by passing, Dustin probably means that accuracy goes awry from time to time, right? I was reading a write-up on him just today, actually, because I feel like I might be behind a little bit on Anthony Richardson. I'm seeing all these reports that not only could he go in the top 10, he's expected by some to absolutely go in the top 10 picks. And that's a surprise. That's been a surprise to me. Some people out there that I trust, that I read a lot of their writing, say that the smart guys out there say it's all mechanic related. He hurries his throws, and that creates these off-target passes, creates tip balls, and those interceptions that you see, and it's just those general misses where he throws it in the dirt or airmails a pass. That's really the primary reason that I have a problem with Richardson being a locked and loaded franchise guy. The athletic skills are clearly there. He's going to wow this week, right? There's there's reports that some expect him to have the best workout of any quarterback that's ever participated fully in the combine. And if that happens, that hype train, Matt, is going to get out of control. Not only are we going to be talking about top 10, but we could be talking about top 5 with Anthony Richardson. I can't wait to see him throw. I can't wait to hear him at the podium. I just can't wait to see what he has to show us, because he's going to be moving up, it feels like, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we have to, I know it's a different situation, but we do have to be careful. We really thought Malik Willis last year was going to go really high, and it's a very different player, especially from the size standpoint, but both running quarterbacks with throwing issues, right? But with Richardson, like, the upside is undeniable. I think all along, though, I've just thought that he's going to need at least 1 year to sit, maybe 2 to fully develop. But at the end of all that, I would definitely not be surprised if he is the best quarterback to come out of this class, at least from a fantasy football perspective. So I just think he needs some time. So if you are drafting him high, like, the question is, would you draft him high? Not on one quarterback for sure. And I mean, I feel like if he goes top 10, I think he has to be a first round pick in Superflex leagues, but just know you're going to have to wait.
He's going to be a first round pick in Superflex.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, almost a lock for both rookie drafts and certainly for the NFL draft. But it just hurts a lot as a dynasty manager to spend a very high draft pick on someone that is probably going to have to sit for at least a year. So if you have the ability to do that, if your team is a complete rebuild and you're not competing next season, absolutely take them high. If you're a contender and have a high first round pick because you made some trades, maybe not as much.
For me, I mean, right now, again, looking at our ADP, Superflex rookie ADP, he is at 7 overall. I'm okay with him at that range. In some of those mock drafts, though, he was selected over Bryce Young, over CJ Stroud. I just don't know why we have to do that, right? To me, they all have upside. And I don't know that I would argue that Richardson's upside is higher than Young or than Stroud. If you want to take him over Will Levis, I understand that. If you want to take him over Charbonnet or the tier 2 wide receivers, I get that as well. It's when people are pushing him up to 2 overall, 3 overall in those super flex rookie drafts. That's where I would probably disagree and pump the brakes a little.
Yeah, I'm pumping the brakes on all of it still. Maybe I'm caught in my priors a little bit, and I got to get on board with these guys that I do trust, but I still see him as, like, personally, I have him 16th in my super flex rankings, and that's probably too low to about 95% of those that do those types of rankings. I get that. I'll take a look at those things maybe as soon as we're done here. Andy Sullivan,
the outlier there, buddy.
Andy Sullivan has a question for us. Any player with more to lose or gain this weekend other than Anthony Richardson? This is a great question because he's the obvious answer, right? He's the one that everybody's talking about right now. But if there's somebody, Matt, that you think could really move up or really move down, who would that be?
Yeah, I just think it's these guys with something to prove. I think Brian mentioned a couple of great ones with Abanikanda. I think we could be mentioning the same thing about these. Like, I just keep going back to these undersized guys. I want us to know how big they are or how small they are. So those same guys, those Tajay Spears, the Tank Dells, even to a lesser extent, Jordan Addison. We're talking about him as a smaller receiver, but he's almost locked in to be a first round pick at this point. Can he elevate himself above JSN, above Quentin Johnson? I feel like Quentin Johnson's going to come out and just destroy this combine. But if he doesn't, then he could take a big tumble. So,
I mean, when you think about the specific question here, more to lose or gain, I don't know that you can find anybody other than Richardson. I mean, he's getting first overall pick talk, and he could come out. He's already moved ahead of Levis in the odds to be the 101, and we've seen Will Levis mocked as the 101, routinely over the past few weeks and past couple months. So that's a big step to overtake Levis. With Bryce Young not doing really anything at the combine, if Richardson does come out and wow, as we really expect him to at this point, I don't know how you could say anybody other than him. You mentioned Quentin Johnston. That's probably the other name, because The wide receivers are packed in there as well. Those top three. Johnston is expected to be, kind of the workout warrior of the trio. So if he pops, maybe he's the wide receiver one now. Maybe he's a top 10 overall pick in the NFL draft. So Johnston, Richardson, those would be my two picks.
How about Kayshon Boutte? He's got something to prove, right? This week, he's got to prove that he's going to have to answer some tough questions. It sounds like, and if that goes well, if he's been coached up well, maybe he doesn't slide like some people are predicting, and maybe that translates over to dynasty. We'll see how that plays out. I know we had a tight end question up here. I'm having a hard time from Monty.
I got it for you.
Yeah, there it is. Monty says, I know 4 decent tight ends in the draft, but given Dulcich, Chigokonkwo, Bellinger, Otten, Jake Ferguson even is mentioned here, and Isaiah Likely are good, where can the new guys go? I write the rookie report card, guys, and I think these guys are all over the place. Sure, Daniel Bellinger is a good NFL tight end. He's going to be a good one for a long time, but part of that is his blocking profile. He plays in an offense. He works along the line of scrimmage. He doesn't belong in the conversation with Chigokonkwo. He has the type of upside that can win you weeks, back-to-back weeks. Same with Greg Dulcich. These guys have that kind of upside. There's plenty of room between tight end 7 or 8 or 9, wherever you're going to put Chig, and maybe I'm higher than others, or Dulcich, and all the way down to Jake Ferguson in the late teens for all of these young guys who, let's be honest, there's a lot of talent in this class. This might be the year of the tight end, and we haven't even started talking about it, honestly. There's so many names to get excited about beyond the top names, and they all have different skill sets. Some of them are seam stretchers. Some of them line up in the slot and can move around the formation, and there's others that are traditional inline tight ends that can be dynamic playmakers in the passing game, along with being good blockers. I can't wait to really dig into this tight end class.
Well, I think he's asking maybe what landing spots they could be. Like, where could they go to have productive NFL career? So, I thought off the bat, of course, because I'm a homer, the Green Bay Packers. Tunyon just isn't really getting it done. The Panthers are sitting there with, Tommy Trimble and, not a ton else. Miami might have a need when Gesicki moves on here. I think there's a lot of spots for tight ends, to be honest with you. The Jets are sitting there with Tyler Conklin. I know they drafted Jeremy Ruckert last season. But I just
the Jets came to mind right away when you said that. How about Detroit? Detroit's like an ideal landing spot. If one of these names end up in Detroit with good draft capital, they're going to move up dynasty rankings for sure.
Well, yeah, I think a couple things come to mind here with this question. First of all, I do think there are some great landing spots for tight ends, and if we get lucky enough to see Michael Mayer and Dalton Kincaid and those guys fall directly into those spots, it's really our lucky day, I guess. Cincinnati, Green Bay, those are the two. Detroit as well that Dan mentioned. Dallas.
Joshua mentioned Dallas and Miami and the Commanders. Those are nice landing spots for sure.
Yeah, the Colts as well. And then the other thing, and this kind of goes a little bit to what you were saying, Dan, I think this is really one of the faults of dynasty players. And I'm definitely, looking in the mirror on this one because I've done it myself. We see those young players that flash a little bit of upside, and we're ready to pencil them in as starters. And NFL teams just do not do that. I'm not assuming Daniel Bellinger is the starter. Certainly not assuming Jake Ferguson is the starter. I think we could, Cade Otten, same thing in Tampa Bay. Solid rookie year. Are they ready to hand him the job? Maybe, but I'm not assuming that. So I think we're going to see multiple teams, and Dallas is probably the most likely one, that have that young tight end that maybe we like from a dynasty standpoint. They still draft another tight end, or maybe they go out and sign one of these tight ends because the free agent market is pretty deep as well, with Schultz and Ingram and Gesicki and a couple deeper guys as well. So yeah, I think there's plenty of landing spots for all these good tight ends.
We're about out of time, but I want to fit in one more question from, I guess, the FBI's watching, guys.
We've got to
better answer truthfully. Which of these teams at the top of the draft are set up the most with coaching and other player support for a quarterback to succeed around? Who's your favorite team to trade for the number 10 or for the 101 in the real NFL draft? I always take this back to Dynasty because really what he says there, he or she says at the end there, favorite team to trade for the top pick in the NFL draft, that does matter. That the players that are already there and the coaching staff that's already there, there's a clear answer. It's Seattle for me. They have everything around them. They have a stable coaching staff. They have good weapons on the outside. They already have a running game, and their offensive line just continues to overperform every single season. They're a playoff team and they have a top 5 pick. It's clearly Seattle. I know a lot of people want Geno back, but I want Seattle to get a quarterback, and because I think that's the ideal landing spot for one.
You're hating on Geno on the pod.
2 days in a row.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Come
on, who you got? Who's better?
I would say go ahead. You go, Ryan.
Dan led that up saying there's an ideal and obvious answer. I thought he was going to say the Indianapolis Colts. That's the obvious answer.
Gross.
What?
Gross compared to Seattle? Oh my gosh, that offensive line has struggled very, very bad. They have one really good offensive lineman and some guys that should be playing in the XFL next week.
They can work on that offensive line. I'm excited about the coaching staff.
Not 75 years old,
Sure, I guess. And I'm excited about Steichen in Indianapolis. That was an over-exaggeration, of course. Yeah, sure, that's a nice landing spot. But either one of those teams, to get one of the top names, they may have to trade up to 1 or 2 or 3 because, with the recent buzz, it's going to get out of control here. And we might be talking about 3 quarterbacks going in the top 3 picks or 3 in the top 4 or 5. So it's kind of exciting. Were you going to go with the same landing spot there, Matt?
That was the top choice for me, but I also thought Atlanta would be fun. They've got weapons in place. So like you said, though, the offensive line is a little bit of an issue, but and then I just feel bad for Houston fans. They're not going to get their top choice unless they pay to swap with Chicago, but you would love to see DeMeco Ryan start off. They've already got a strong defense. They got the defensive head coach as well, and to have him start off with a fresh new quarterback to develop would be just awesome.
Over 66 says the answer is Detroit. Detroit has the 18th pick. They don't have a top pick. So
they do. They have 6. They got number 6.
Oh, they have 6. That's right. They got the Rams pick, I think.
That's the spot for Richardson, though. That's the spot for Richardson.
Yep.
How about Mr. Scampers, who says the Panthers? That's an interesting one. I wouldn't list them as the top landing spot, but a decent one. Certainly playing time to be had there.
Yeah.
They don't have the same kind of weapons that we're talking about in Seattle for sure, and even Indianapolis. I guess that's going to do it for our first ever live DLF Dynasty podcast. It went well. It was fun. We appreciate every one of you for joining in with us. We tried to get as many questions in as we could. I'm sorry if we couldn't quite fit yours in, but next time we're hoping, at least the 3 of us are hoping, that we can make this a semi-regular thing. So for Matt and Ryan, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening to this live version of the DLF Dynasty podcast, and hopefully we catch you next time.